Alright, so tonight we're doing Parasha Tazria. As you know, most years Tazria and Metzorah are read together. This year, because it's a leap year, Tazria is separate. Next week will be Metzorah. By now we have seen all kinds of situations that bring about distance between the Jew and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, between the Jew and God. Whether it's a sin, transgression, which is a form of disobeying God's instructions that causes distance. But we also discussed the different kinds of tum'ah, different kinds of impurity that bring about a certain distance, because the service of Hashem needs to be done in purity, with kedusha, with holiness, in order for it to be a stronger bond. Even if somebody is not clean, he can still be connected, but not as strong as if he were to be clean and pure. And the great tzaddikim, of course, were even closer to Hashem because of their high spiritual levels. So we spoke about different kinds of things that bring about distance, including the foods that are forbidden. Certain foods are forbidden for us to eat, and they also are associated with the impure camp. And if one were to eat them, first of all, he's committing a transgression by eating things that are forbidden for him to eat. But also, they contain a certain amount of impurity. Tonight, we're going to see, however, a different kind of situation where an individual can become distant not only from God, but from man as well. And that is the Metzorah. A Metzorah, as it's translated in English, a leper, is not really a leper. Leprosy today is not the tzarat which the Torah describes. When the Torah describes the various types of tzarat, it's describing a discoloration of the skin, for the most part. And it's not necessarily related to the leprosy that we know. But we call it leprosy because perhaps it resembles a little bit leprosy, but it's not the leprosy. It was an illness, it was a major illness, but not so much of a physical illness, a spiritual illness. And it's not something simple at all. It was a very, very serious illness, and the rehabilitation or the cure for this illness is found in Parashat Metzorah. So tonight we won't be talking too much about the cure of this individual who contracted tzarat, but just a little bit more about what it is, what exactly is tzarat and why it would appear. What's interesting is that in the previous parasha, Parashat Shemini, we discussed how to identify a pure animal from a non-pure animal. The kosher animals have certain identifying marks. There are certain ones that are considered tameh. And what's interesting about tzarat is that here we are seeing identifying marks of what makes an individual tameh. What the human being, in other words, does as a result of certain things that he does, he can become tameh as well. Why is tzarat something so important that we have two parshiot that cover this illness that we don't really see today? It was something very unusual at the time when it did exist. But why is there so much emphasis on it? We must realize that today we live in a world that is very unstable, let's just say. There's a lot of turmoil, political turmoil. And a lot of what is happening in the background is reminiscent of what the climate was right before World War I and World War II. Very, very unstable, very, very dangerous. And the reason for that is because what we're witnessing is humanity that is completely empty of any spiritual values. Morality is pretty much non-existent. So when there's no spirituality and there's no morality, what you're seeing instead is that everyone is more focused on what is there in there for me. People are more selfish. Countries are more selfish. Everybody's looking for their own interest. This, by the way, is the shoresh of machloket. This is the root of what leads to division, what leads to dissension, what leads to a lot of problems, whether it's between human beings or even in a marriage. A lot of marriages are suffering these days for similar reasons. People are more selfish, more into themselves, more focused in what they can gain from this relationship as opposed to what they can contribute. So the symptoms that we see in the world are very much also being reflected in the home. Unfortunately, we're exposed, and therefore a lot of homes suffer the ills of society. Unless, of course, they're somehow protected. It is very possible that they may become influenced by what's going on outside. Hashem wanted to prevent the Jewish people from behaving the way the rest of the world behaves. In other words, with a complete lack of clarity as far as what life's mission is all about, what's the purpose of everything. Judaism is against being selfish. On the contrary, we're all into helping each other, doing for each other. Very different philosophy, different way of looking at life. But we're all human beings. We're all created in the image of God. So in other words, we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. Human beings are the same in many, many ways. So even though our mission is different, we are still capable of, unfortunately, behaving in a way which is not compatible with the Torah. So regardless of whether one is Jewish or not, the Torah describes certain symptoms that can apply to all. However, even though these symptoms can apply to all, the emphasis here is on Jews because they are the ones that for the most part experienced tzaraat much more than the non-Jews. Even though there were instances where non-Jews, as we will soon see, contracted tzaraat, they were unique. They were the exception and not the rule. Because by us, mahloket, arguments, divisiveness, can be very destructive, Torah warns us, therefore, be careful with the ingredients that lead to mahloket, to divisiveness. And what are they? In other words, tzaraat, this illness that we're talking about, would come about for three main reasons. The three ingredients for which the tzaraat is known for. One of them is arrogance. The other one is sarut ain, which I guess we can translate as narrow eyes, or chesh tang in Farsi. A narrowness of the eye, which is a very important idea, and I'll explain a little bit more what that means. But you can also say stinginess, plus lashon hara, which means evil talk, negative talk, slanderous talk, and so forth, which was one of the prime culprits of one who would be affected by tzaraat, because of his lashon hara, the way he spoke about others. So these characteristics, these flaws in character, are really considered illnesses in themselves, especially if one is very, very obsessed by them. If one is very, very much into that, he cannot get away from them so easily, he behaves like that all the time, then it becomes a problem. It's therefore just like an illness. But with an illness, the physical body suffers and tries to get some help from the doctor. Here, with tzaraat, a doctor, a regular doctor, would not be able to help him. He would have to go to the Kohen. The Kohen would give him instructions. The Kohen would first determine where it's coming from. And in the end, it will be up to the individual, up to the Metzorah himself, to take action, to hopefully remedy his personal situation. Because his life can be completely destroyed, spiritually speaking and physically, if he doesn't take action. These are serious character flaws. These are big problems that not only affect society at large, but a lot of the issues in life, a lot of the problems people have something to do with these character flaws. So here we have an individual who would appear with some discoloration of the skin. And there's quite a few types of tzaraat mentioned in Parashat Tazria and in Metzorah. All kinds of discolorations, as we will see next week. There's even a discoloration of the wall in the house. There's a discoloration in clothing. And there's a discoloration in the physical body. Right now we're concerned about the discoloration of the physical body. And even that, different kinds. And we don't know for sure right away if this is tameh or not, if this is unclean. But it definitely presents a question which the Kohen needs to investigate. Because if it turns out that this is serious, then obviously the Metzorah is given instructions what he needs to do, because he can't just let it go on and ignore it. This is a major illness. You know what they say about beauty? Beauty is only skin deep. You've heard of that expression? It's just something exterior. Beauty, skin deep. It has no depth to it. This problem is not just skin deep. This is really deep. This has a shoresh, this has a root, a deep root that needs immediate attention. Otherwise, the problems will continue to come back and come back and come back in different areas, different aspects of a person's life. So this is a siman min hashamayim. He's getting here a sign from Shamayim. This is a favor to him. Sir, you need to take action. This is like a check engine light turning on in your car. It could be something minor, the check engine sensor, or it could also be something serious. So you don't want to take a chance with your life. Person who has chest pains, he better go to the doctor. It could be serious. All kinds of signs that the physical body gives the individual, warning signs. Go check it out. Baruch Hashem. We feel hungry. Baruch Hashem. Because if a person would never feel hungry, he wouldn't eat. He could die. There's all kinds of signs that the physical body gives us so that we should know things have to be taken care of. So this particular sign was very different. It was not typical. It was not very common. And it was clearly a sign. You see, from Shamayim there's hashgacha, there's divine providence. They're letting you know, they're calling you. They're notifying you something is wrong. Something is seriously wrong with that individual's behavior. Let's say just behavior. It could be all kinds of things that he did wrong, but it's the behavior. And because it's the behavior, you might think this is not a big deal, it's just the behavior. No. Judaism is reminding us through these parshiot, you see, it's not just about fulfilling God's commandments, doing certain things, or abstaining from certain things. The Torah puts great emphasis on our thoughts, that they should be clean thoughts, on our perspective and outlook towards life, and how we judge people. Because all of this, you may say, this is just midot, this is just characteristics. The guy is stingy. He's going to give his dues. You know, whatever he owes the Kohen, whatever he owes the Levi, he's going to give the poor man some tzedakah too. So what's wrong with him being a little on the stingy side? He wants to save his money. Yeah. What's wrong with that? It's just another type of characteristic, stinginess. But obviously, this is not acceptable. People need to learn how to share. And some people have a problem with it. They're not happy for someone else. They're jealous of someone else. And because of that, they may talk negatively about them. So even though this may not be the biggest sin, you may think, he didn't steal from him, he didn't kill him, he didn't hurt him in any way. The Torah considers this very, very serious. These character flaws are just like an illness, a very serious illness that this individual needs to take care of. Because it's serious, guess what happens? This tzaraat would appear publicly, in the open. It wouldn't be behind his shirt. They would be able to see it, to compel him, to force him, go see the doctor. In this case, go see the Kohen. Imagine if nobody can see it. Nobody can see it anyway. Why should I bother with it? It's not going to kill him. No, it was in a way that it was in a place where people can actually see it. So that he should be brought to the Kohen. Vehuvai la Kohen. He will be brought to the Kohen. Sir, this has to be looked into. This is a sign min hashamayim, you should know that. You can't just ignore it. And the same is true also with couples. Sometimes, there are all kinds of issues. There are problems. people can't get along, they have differences of opinion. Bring it to an expert. Bring it to the attention of somebody that could really help. Somebody that is familiar with this type of problem. Somebody who's familiar with Judaism, obviously, in order for them to give their expert opinion as to what is the best solution. So whether it's an illness where we go to the doctor, whether it's tzarat because of some character flaw, an expert would need to evaluate it. What about if the Kohen himself was an expert and he himself contracted tzarat? En adam ro'eh nig'ei atzmo. The rabbis tell us a person cannot see his own faults. It's hard. It's not easy for people to admit that they have a fault. So it has to be taken to someone else. For someone else to evaluate it, to look at it, and say, sir, I'm an outsider, I'm not biased, lo nogea b'davar. I can tell you that this is the issue over here. And if you're willing to solve it, this is what it will take. So what we see so far is that this was a tremendous chesed. It's actually an act of kindness, mishamayim, that the individual is notified. People have the wrong understanding of tzarat or any yisurin, any form of pain and suffering that the Torah describes. It's a punishment for a sin. It's all rachamim. Even a punishment is rachamim. Mercy. How do we see that? I was thinking perhaps, even in tzarat itself, there is an indicator of how it's mercy. Much of the tzarat is white. What does white have to do with it? Why that color? Because white is mercy. That's the color that represents mercy. So just perhaps an indirect way where we can see that this tzarat, where you think it's embarrassing, it is letting you know of a fault, in reality it's all rachamim from Shamayim. To remind us that life is short, you got to take care of this problem. You can't go on with your life with this problem, with this symptom, this character flaw, whichever it may be. Now, if we look at medicine, in the last 80, 90, 100 years or so, they've succeeded in pretty much eliminating polio. They've succeeded in getting rid of smallpox, if you recall those diseases. And they almost also succeeded in overcoming tuberculosis. These three, and others of course, were a big, big problem. Very, very dangerous, and in the past posed tremendous life-threatening diseases. They couldn't be easily cured. Today they're under control, more or less these are under control. But isn't it interesting how in every generation there will always be some illness that they can't cure, cannot cure completely. Eventually they do more or less figure it out, something else comes up. We have such a tradition that in every generation there will always be some illness that no doctor, nobody will be able to figure out how to completely cure it. And the reason for that is to remind us, Ki hu ar-rofeh kol basar u'maflil la'asot. He is the main doctor. He is the one that we need to turn to. And sometimes he puts us in a situation just for that reason alone. Turn to me. This knowledge, this detail, that Hashem is really the one that's in charge, this piece of information is something that a lot of people do not know. They really think that the doctor in the hospital is in charge. He's a good messenger perhaps, but he's not the one that's going to make the final decision. Upstairs they make the decision. Don't forget about upstairs. Tzarat was therefore an excellent example to remind the individual, this is not something that you can just go and get something over the counter. This won't go away unless you take action. You turn to him. And what is he going to ask of you? He's going to ask of you to be more submissive. Yoter nichna. As we see with the case of Naaman. Naaman was a non-Jew, a general. He's described in the Haftarah. He was a very arrogant man, very, very confident because of his victories, very proud. And therefore he contracted tzaraat, and he had to be told by a Jewish prophet, go dip a few times in the Jordan River, that will take care of it. And he thought that was ridiculous. He says, our rivers are better than all your rivers. What kind of a thing is that? What are you telling me? That will take care of this problem? Just dip a few times? What is this, hocus pocus? What kind of nonsense, he says, is this? Until he was told, what do you care? Try it. This is what they're telling you, and this is coming from a reliable source. So he says, okay, I have nothing to lose. Oh, he finally was thinking, using some common sense, he has nothing to lose, right? And as soon as he dipped a few times in the Jordan River, it went away. His problems disappeared. The tzaraat was gone. This hichniya oto. This humbled him. This made him more submissive in realizing, yeah, we're only human beings. You know, we're not in full control over anything, except, of course, the attitude that we have, the way we think, the way we behave somewhat, but we have no control over everything else. So that requires a little bit of hachna'ah, submissiveness, humbleness, which he needed. So Hashem was kind to him and brought him into this kind of a situation, put him in that situation in order that he should get help from someone who will teach him what his problem is, what his weakness is. You can be a great man, much greater than you know, if you only were a little bit more submissive and more humble than what you are. And he got the message. But speaking about how this is rachamim, because of its whiteness, I was also thinking that as we get older, our hair turns white. And that is also perhaps a sign that the time is approaching, the end of life is coming. So wake up. So that whiteness in the hair is also a sign for us to take note that the time is almost up. It's fast approaching. And we have a lot yet to accomplish, and perhaps a lot of things that we need to correct that we haven't yet taken any action to correct them. So all of this fits into with the same idea that we've been saying all along, is that there are many, many signs from Shamayim, many, many signs from heaven that are designed to awaken man to his senses, to bring it to his attention that there's something that needs immediate correction. Perhaps one of the reasons why it just comes out that we read about this close to Pesach is because during Pesach, what are we doing? What are we busy with? We're occupied with bi'ur chametz, with burning or eliminating all the chametz, all the leavened bread that we have in our possession, getting rid of it. That leavened bread, that chametz, symbolizes the Yetzer Hara. Chametz grows. Have you seen the bread grow? Have you ever made a challah or bread? You'll see it grow. And that growing is symbolic of that arrogance. And during Pesach, we bring that arrogance down completely. We disallow it. We want to experience the miracles of Pesach, of Yetziat Mitzrayim. We want to be able to really thank Hashem for the miracles of the past that happened so long ago. How can you relate to something so long ago? By taking this medicine, as the Zohar calls it, eating only matzah, not chametz, but only now, not the whole year, especially now. This is the time when this medication needs to be taken, and it's a very interesting medication. No chametz, only matzah, flat bread, that it has not grown. Unleavened bread, because of what it symbolizes. Apparently, on a spiritual level, it does something to us. But here, at the very least, it's symbolic. It's reminding us, listen, you gotta remove that Yetzer Hara, you gotta burn it. Otherwise, it's gonna interfere in your life. It's gonna give you a hard time to observe the mitzvot. This is the source of your problems. So in the same way that the Yetzer Hara is the one that's behind a man's negative behavior, let's just say, the same is true with the Metzorah. The Metzorah not through chametz, but the Metzorah, through the tzarat that he contracted, was being reminded, look, it is due as a result of whether it's your narrow eyes or whether it's your stinginess or whatever, arrogance, that your life is not going in the right direction. It could be his marriage is not going in the right direction. It could be his relationship with other people, human beings, neighbors is not going in the right direction. And of course, this is the foundation of the mitzvot between us and Hashem. In other words, the mitzvot, the commandments between us and other human beings, in a way, come first. They are the introduction. If we cannot refine our character enough to get along with people, then how will we do with Hashem? So Derech Eretz, the Rabbi tells, Kadma la Torah. These mitzvot that relate between man and man come first. Come first meaning that one has to perfect himself in that area. And if that area is not perfected, then the area of mitzvot ben adam lamakom, between him and Hashem, will not be strong either. Which is why the prophets, all the years when we heard their words, for the most part, they rebuked us on these mitzvot, ben adam lechavero, between man and man. Of course they were upset, Hashem was upset, and let them know that even our relationship with him is lacking. Nachon, it's true. But much of what they said and rebuked us, reminded us, was that we were not fair. We were not behaving ourselves properly in that which pertains between man and man. And that is why the first and the second temple were destroyed as a result of all those sins. But here we have prophets reminding us that what we're doing is wrong. It's hard to understand why they didn't listen to them. That just proves the point that the evil inclination is so powerful. Don't underestimate it. Don't ever say, oh, it's okay, I can handle it. This weakness is not a problem. It's a problem. And that is why Mishamayim, they let us know. This is an act of kindness from Shamayim to let the individual know, listen, you got to take care of this. Now, it could be that some people were notified right away, some people perhaps later, some people maybe were not notified altogether. It all depends on the neshama. The rabbis tell us the greater the person is, the more they are demanding of him upstairs, the more they expect of him. And if it's a real learned individual who's otherwise okay, they're going to be upset at him if there's something in his life that is not right. So of course they're going to wake him up. It could be, as we will see next week, the first warning signal was on the walls of the house, not on this physical body. Then it was in the clothes, and then it came on the physical body. Because, as the rabbis explain, the finances is always touched or hurt by the attribute of justice first, before the attribute of justice goes after one's physical body. In other words, before the physical body gets hurt and has to pay or atone for some serious offense, they first send him a reminder, try to correct it if possible. And that reminder will not touch him physically right away, it will first come on the walls of the house. As an example, with Sarat, it will touch or affect his finances and not his physical body. So there's different signals, 1, 2, 3, and sometime in between them, until he would realize that this is something serious, that he has something to do, that he needs to do something about it. So what would happen if the Metzorah would take it seriously? Then he would take it upon himself to correct his offenses, his character flaws, and then the tzarat would go away. If you read the Parasha, you will notice how at times the Kohen would evaluate the Metzorah and he would tell him, you know what, I'm not sure yet, come back next week. He would quarantine him for a while. What's all that for him? Either yes or no. You're not sure? All of that is also from Shamayim. You have time to take care of it. Because once the person would become tameh, unclean completely as a result of Zarat, it's not a good thing. He's outside of the camp of Israel. He's away from people. He's like an outcast. It's very, very serious. It's very embarrassing. So So in some ways, he would be given a chance. Check it out. This may be a problem. Try to fix it, do teshuvah, repent, so they should, hopefully by next time you come see the Kohen, it will no longer be there. And you know what? This has happened with all kinds of tumors that people have had, growths, where the doctor has images of. And the next time around when they came and checked it out again, it's gone. What happened? They have a picture of it. They have an image. It was a real thing. It was there. Where did it go? Well, it could have been a blessing of a big tzaddik, of course. It could have been teshuvah. It could have been tehillim. It could have been tzedakah that the person took upon himself. It helps. That is what it's for. Sometimes it's just in its initial stage, the tumor, or it could end up being benign. Nothing to worry about. But it's always going to depend on how we deal with it. If we hopefully turn to Hashem, pray more seriously, then that may help. When people, God forbid, are in a situation like that, which is very, very dangerous, they really should. They have nothing to lose, only to gain. Take upon themselves some commitment, because that will save the day possibly. You never know. That is why the Rabbi tells, never give up, even if you see that the sword is about to come down, the guillotine, and there's no way that you're going to be spared from the gallows, because that's it. Regardless of what your situation is, never give up hope from rachamim, mercy. Hashem can at the last second, save a person. And one story that I'd like to share that illustrates this point is my sister's father-in-law, of blessed memory. He was a Holocaust survivor. He was in Auschwitz as a young man. And he was already in the gas chamber. Already inside the gas chamber, they closed the doors, and all that was needed is to press a button to let the gas out. That's it. The last second, all of a sudden, somebody opened the door. We need workers to do some repair work in the railroad or something. Last second, they realized they needed some extra hands. And of course, before you know it, they were liberated. After they did the work, whatever it was, within a day or two, they were liberated from Auschwitz. They stayed alive. What is that? It's an open miracle. We see the Hashgacha of Hashem, we see the divine providence everywhere. People ask, where was God in the Holocaust? Anybody who survived will tell you where God was. He was with him. How did he survive? So it depends how you look at it. Hashgacha, divine providence, is a very important principle in Judaism, that we see it. Not only does it apply on a global scale, where Hashem is involved with what happens in this world, but also on an individual basis. Hashem directs us, He takes care of us, but of course, we need to turn to Him. In order for that relationship to be real, in order for us to feel it, we have to believe in Him. Those who do not have bitachon, proper trust in Him, will not experience so much that hashgacha. They will not see open miracles. You have to believe in Him, trust in Him, and then there will be many, many opportunities where you can see that hashgacha. So here, in Metzorah, which appears to be something very, very bad, and it is, it's not something very, very nice for a person to contract tzaraat, still, it's all be'hashgacha. It's all rachamim, tested from Hashem, to help this individual rehabilitate himself, to get himself back into society and to be accepted, to hopefully do whatever he needs to do to correct his problems so that he can get along with people. Because whatever it is that he had before was ruining his life, ruining his relationships with people, leading to mahloket, to divisiveness and to all kinds of problems. Hashem doesn't want that. So here He's doing us a favor. So how easy it is to fix a character flaw? This particular symptom or symptoms that brought about tzaraat was actually not easy to correct at all. because we're talking about midot, character flaws. Averot, with sins, you ask Hashem for forgiveness, you bring a korban, you bring a sacrifice, you do teshuvah, sincere teshuvah, you confess, and hopefully Hashem will forgive and atone. Here, this is major work. This is a major tune-up. Because we're dealing with character, this is a lot of work. Not everybody succeeds in life to change even one characteristic. It's not easy. It doesn't mean it's impossible, it's just not easy. It requires a lot of learning, a lot of guidance, depending on what the problem is. But before the guidance and before the learning, it requires a decision. A sincere decision, I'm gonna change. Not completely change, you can't completely change yourself, but I'm gonna control myself. So how would you do that? How would you get the upper hand, at least, in controlling a certain character flaw? So in the olden days, we had, of course, the Kohanim who would guide this individual, who would teach him. Today, the rabbis gave us a beautiful gift, and it's called Pirkei Avot, which I have, by the way, a whole series of lectures on Pirkei Avot that was uploaded from many years ago. Ethics of our fathers, that basically gives us guidance and advice in how to deal with many, many of the issues that we all confront every day of our life. Important information that if one really understands it very well, no doubt about it that it will help him. But as you know, from doing to implementing is a long road. People learn it and they say, yes, I agree with it, they don't necessarily implement it. So it requires constant vigilance. How are we going to have constant vigilance on ourselves? We're going to learn Musar, not just Pirkei Avot. On a regular basis, every Jew should learn some Musar, Jewish ethics. There's a lot of good books today on Musar, whether it's Chovat HaLevavot, Mesilat Yesharim, Orchot Tzadikim, all kinds of beautiful, some of them are in other languages as well. Very important. And even that may not be enough. Because the human being is very complex, very, very complex. It's not easy for the human being to make any even small changes in his life if he's gotten used to a certain way of life. Here we're talking about his body or his personality. Much more difficult. At the very least, what the Torah is asking us is try. Make a decision, realize where you're wrong and what needs to be perfected. And if you really, really try, the good news is Hashem will help you, because if Hashem doesn't help, then it is very, very difficult. It's very, very challenging. So Hashem helps those who first help themselves. If a person doesn't help himself, doesn't try, then he won't receive that assistance. So here we have a Metzorah that was humbled as a result of what happened to him. And hopefully he's sincere. And Hashem is the only one that knows if we're sincere. Hashem does not need a machine that, like a lie detector. Is this Metzorah sincere or not sincere? Gotta check him out. Hashem knows exactly what's in our hearts and minds, and therefore, if it was proper teshuvah, it would go away the tzarat. Now, you've heard of the word relapse. An illness can come back. Well, that's what would happen with tzarat too. The person went back to his old ways. He may get a new tzarat, a new form, a more severe form. But he can always do teshuvah. A person should never give up, as we said before, and realize that Hashem is there to help him, not there to get him, for being with the way he is. We're only human beings. But we have to recognize that this is a fault, that this is wrong. We have to be educated. And that's why learning is so important. And then take action, whatever it takes. All right, so now that we realize how serious tzarat was, let's see what tzarat is all about. Even though I've given the three more basic ingredients or characteristic flaws that brought about tzarat, and they were arrogance, tzarut ayin, the narrowness of the eye, and lashon hara, for some reason, the word tzarat is using sarut. The word sarat is comprised of the root, or the Hebrew root, narrowness. Why? What does narrowness have to do with anything here? So the Torah is revealing to us that this is the root of everything. When people's eyes' vision is narrow. What does that mean? It means that they don't always see the big picture. They don't want to see the big picture, or they don't see it. No, they don't want to. In reality, they could if they wished to see the bigger picture, but they see only a narrow picture of an individual or of a situation. For example, let's say this individual who has this problem of tzarut ayn is being asked a favor by another fellow. The one who has a narrow vision will only see himself. Does this interest me or not? If I help him, will that help me or not? You see, he doesn't see the needs of this guy. He doesn't see the bigger picture. Sir, you know that life is about sharing? There's other people on this planet who deserve to live too. You remember that I always mention the fact that there's some people who say, oh, in the 70s I wish I would have bought the whole block. I had the money. I could have bought the whole block. I only bought one house. Sir, you're greedy. Greedy? Yeah. What about everybody else that bought? Don't they deserve one house at least in that block? You wanted to have the whole block for yourself? People don't realize that sometimes they don't see the bigger picture, that everybody deserves something, not just you. So here in the word sarat, we're seeing the source of many of the problems here, a narrowness of the vision, where people see themselves much more than they see others, because they're not willing to see the bigger picture. But sometimes they do see other people. But the problem is they see only their faults, and they don't see their pluses. We all have strengths and weaknesses. Why do you only point to the man's faults or weaknesses? Don't you see the other part of him? He's also a nice guy. He's also a generous individual. So even if the individual does see another person, unfortunately he will only focus on the bad and not on the good. And that's no good. And that is, of course, why people can speak Lashon Hara so easily, negatively about others, because they're only focusing on the negative. If they would see all the positive there, they wouldn't want to say the negative. So you see how the narrowness of the vision, the narrowness of the eye, is limiting what they can see or what they're willing to see. The human being is created in the image of Hashem. We say that in Bereshit, Ki b'tzelem Elokim bara oto. Did you forget that? So what if he's from another country? So what if his skin color is different? Big deal. It says Tzelem Elokim, doesn't it? Now, obviously, if the person does not behave himself, if he's acting like an animal, we understand why he's treated like one. But assuming he's a normal individual, normal human being, he's just poor. Poor fellow. Because of that, you don't want to have any pity on him, just because he's poor. A lot of people will say, well, let him work harder. Let him get a job. Let him take a second job. Where's your pity and your compassion for another human being? Have you evaluated his entire life? Perhaps he's not healthy. He can't work. Perhaps he has a lot of responsibilities. He doesn't have the time to go fetch a job. If the vision, the scope is very, very narrow, people are not going to consider all of these things. And it's a shame, because that's what leads to problems, to Lashon Hara. People don't want to see the bigger picture. So what do we see so far? That this is called narrowness because all of the three that I mentioned before, the three major factors that contribute towards sarat, or to bring about sarat, stinginess, arrogance, and narrowness of the eye, not willing to share, is all found in the word tsar, narrowness. Because his vision is narrow, he doesn't share his wealth. He's kamtzan, he's chasis, he's stingy. He only sees himself. Arrogance, he sees himself. So you see how all of these character flaws are, or have something in common. Narrowness of the eye, which is why perhaps tzarat is called tzarat, because that would come about as a result of some narrowness in the vision of this individual, whether it's being expressed as arrogance, expressed as stinginess, or simply narrow eye, where he doesn't want to share his wealth with others, he's greedy, and the like. Now with Lashon Hara, it could be easily overcome, the negativity, as we just said before. An individual can easily control his speech if he gave the benefit of the doubt to the individual. You know, you saw somebody, you suspect him of doing something, of not acting in the proper way. You know you always have the option of giving him the benefit of the doubt. Then why don't you? Because you're not seeing the bigger picture. The bigger picture would allow us to see other possibilities. This guy perhaps did not know, perhaps didn't realize something. Whatever, all kinds of situations where if we give somebody the benefit of the doubt, that would spare us from this terrible sin called Lashon Hara, of speaking negatively about others, looking down at them as a result of that. Be very, very careful. Look at the bigger picture and don't immediately rush to conclusions and be suspicious of somebody if you don't know the whole situation. And even if you know the whole situation, what I tell my kids is, even if it's 100% true that what this individual did is wrong, misken, I say in Hebrew, misken means poor fellow. He doesn't know any better. He couldn't control himself. He couldn't overcome his yetzer hara. Instead of criticizing him and calling him by names of Rasha, this evil individual, maybe he just succumbed to his evil inclination. He doesn't have a record of an entire lifetime behaving like this. Maybe in the past few years, he's gone through a lot of pressure in his life. Who knows? This is the way we need to train ourselves. The rabbis tell us, train yourself, ladun lechav zechut, give people the benefit of the doubt, and this will protect you from Lashon Hara. This is one of the ways to protect oneself from speaking negatively about us. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So, when a person does not, what does it mean? Einayim tsarot. His eyes are very narrow, and they're not seeing more of the picture that there is to see. But it's not because they can't, he doesn't want to. If he somehow trained himself, you know, there's a bigger picture out there. You can see a lot more if you really, really took the time. People don't do that. Just like to finish, we may have talked about this in the past, that in the Kabbalah, it is brought down that every limb in every organ that we have corresponds to another mitzvah, to either a positive commandment or a negative commandment. And sometimes a limb, an organ becomes defective, let's just say defective, as a result of either not fulfilling a certain mitzvah, or as a result of transgressing a certain avirah. And sometimes, as a result of something in the previous lifetime that was wrong or missing, one comes back in a new reincarnation and already has, or is born with that blemish or that physical defect to remind him, to serve as a reminder, you know, this has to be rectified. Now, I'm not, of course, in the position to say why certain people suffer from certain ailments. I don't think there's anybody in this generation that can know with certainty, but we do know there's a reason for everything. And there have been stories, I'm only saying there have been stories of people who themselves somehow said that they were born mute, because in the previous lifetime, even though they were very observant and tzaddikim and learned, talmidei chachamim, but they were very, very weak in Lashon Hara. So they come to Shamayim So I said, you did a perfect job. You did everything right. You went to nets, you prayed every morning on time, you did a lot of chesed, kindness, you did a lot of charity, you did all the mitzvot, you did everything right, but your lashon hara was very, very uncontrolled and not nice. And for you, for a person who's learned it, we would expect a lot better. So even though you deserve a very high final resting place in Gan Eden, you can't get there so quickly. Eventually you will, because your merits are not taken away. But in order to get there, you still have to refine that one area that needs refinement. So what does the neshama say? Wait a minute, if you're going to send me back, I'm afraid I'm going to say lashon hara again. Don't worry, this time will help you. You won't be able to talk. So, again, it's not something that we know with certainty about every individual. I would never dare tell somebody that this is because of that, because we don't know for sure. But it is possible, it is a possibility that this relates to a previous lifetime, or sometimes things happen in this lifetime. But I gave you an example of a defect from birth. Because when it's from birth, the guy, the man, the woman, did not even have a chance to sin yet. Then it has to be from a previous lifetime. Otherwise, born with this? You may have a question now, well, what about the parents? What do they deserve? That's a whole different topic. You can listen to the topic on reincarnation where I discuss why the parents have to deal with it. You know, why do they deserve something like that they have to experience this pain? Either way, what we see from this is that even though we don't have tzarat of the tzarat that we had back then, we have other things that perhaps take its place, other kinds of ailments, other kinds of signs, mishamayim, that actions need to be taken to correct a particular area in the physical body, a limb, an organ that corresponds to a certain mitzvah, either from this lifetime or from a previous lifetime. There is one, however, area in this parasha that appears not to be related to Metzorah, but for some reason it's mentioned, and that is Yoledet, a woman giving birth. After all, that's the name of the parasha, Tazria. And I was thinking a little bit before I came here, is there any connection between a woman giving birth to a Metzorah? That's how the parasha begins, by telling us the laws of a woman giving birth. Now we know that the simple explanation is tumah. There's an additional type of tumah involving a yoledet, that she's unclean for a number of days, depending if it's a boy or girl. Okay, fine. But I believe there's perhaps a deeper message over here. Remember, a yoledet, a woman that gave birth, would also bring a korban. She would bring a sacrifice. A metzorah, part of his rehabilitation involves a korban too. So there are some similarities here, but perhaps the more important message may be that look at this yoledet, Mr. Metzorah. This yoledet has what to be thankful. She brought new life into this world. So even though it was painful for her, even though she's teme'ah, unclean, and cannot be with her husband for a number of days, and bring the sacrifice, yes, but at the very least, look at her actions. She brought life into this world. And what did you do? You're bringing death into this world. Your actions are being destructive, pulling people apart, causing fights amongst people, divisiveness, lashon hara, baseless hatred, arrogance, all of that. This breaks up people. This causes damage. And she brings in life. Perhaps learn from her as a message that this is ultimately the goal. Be productive in a positive way. Don't think of only yourself. This is my baby, I want to do with it. I can do with it whatever I want. If I want to abort it, I should. God forbid, this is not your baby. This is a gift of life that you're bringing into the world. But people have the wrong, distorted way of thinking. I can decide what to do with my body. This is a gift of life. The greatest act of love, that you're giving this child an opportunity. You're bringing life into this world. Unless they're very unhappy with this world. Or they're very selfish. It's all about selfishness. They see only themselves and they don't see another life, another baby, another human being. This is perhaps the more important message. Think about life and giving love to other people as well.